Hello and welcome to Emsi webinars. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're very excited because we're going to be talking about skills today. Very topical and always important. We're joined by Emsi's Managing Director, Andy Durman, and also Duncan Brown, who is Emsi's Senior Economist. If you have any questions during the course of the webinar, please put them in the questions box on your control panel, and we'll endeavour to get back to those at the end of the presentation. You will be receiving a follow-up email with the recording and slides from today, so please keep your eyes open for that. So I think that's it. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to you, Andy. Hi, Andy.
Hi, Debbie. Thank you very much, and hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us again, either live or on the or watching the recording down the line. Great to be with you, and great to have Duncan alongside me. Well, kind of virtually alongside me today. So hi, Duncan.
Hello there.
Great. So yes, the aim of today really is about thinking about the economic recovery. We've obviously been working through a number of challenges in our economy recently, and we're keen to shine a spotlight on where things are now starting to pick back up again. So excited to share what we're finding and some thoughts and some ideas that we're having as we scour the labour market. So before we get into that, just a quick reminder for those regulars, but anyone new, welcome. Thanks for joining us. The work here at Emsi is really about helping you and your organizations make better, more informed decisions about the labour market, both in terms of your own work and then the communities that you serve. And we want to empower you to have the insight and the data about what's happening in your economy right now, so that you can really steer and guide your own decision making and the support you provide to the stakeholders and communities that you serve. So that's our one and only mission in life here at Emsi. And of course, we are the folks that work hard to bring that data to you to help with all of that and the important work that you're doing. So in terms of what we're going to explore today then, certainly as we zoom quickly into the anniversary of lockdown 1 on the 23rd of March, I think was the announcement. I remember that because it's my eldest son's birthday, and he was very excited to have a lockdown birthday, and continues to be unexcited about having another lockdown birthday as we come through. But of course, things are easing. But since then, we've been working hard to track how the labour market has been impacted throughout the process as lockdown came, as the various economic interventions were put in place, as lockdown was eased through the summer, and then obviously things picked back up again, sadly, as we headed through autumn into winter. But yeah, we've been working hard to track that and sharing that through our webinars and resources and the work that we've done, and we hope that's been helpful to you in managing through this period. But as we mentioned in our last webinar, we really do want to kind of start to think about the slightly more positive and opportunistic side of things, and really start to think about what is driving our economic recovery as we emerge on the other side. The Prime Minister's laid out that roadmap, and obviously the devolved nations have their own roadmaps of easing. Things seem to be heading in the right direction there. And so we want to really focus our attention and the information that we're going to share through this webinar and coming webinars to really start to shine a spotlight on where the opportunities are. So today, we're going to kick off with Duncan's data dabbling and explore some headline trends about the current labour market and what we're seeing in the labour market, with a particular focus on where the opportunities appear to be emerging. We want to then delve deeply into that to really think about what are the right skills, what are the skills that employers are seeking, what are those skills, how do we take advantage of these emerging opportunities, and ultimately help our communities have those skills to hand, understand the skills that they have. And very excitingly, we'll close out the session by sharing with you a new solution that we're making available that is really about trying to navigate that world, particularly at that granular skills level. I'm very excited to share that with you shortly. So I'm going to hand over to my partner in webinars, the data guru himself, Duncan Brown, to sort of talk us through a few of our observations thus far. Duncan.
Help everybody to a stage of new enlightenment if I'm a data guru, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, obviously we spoke a lot about this a month ago, and so a lot of this will be about just kind of recapping that, and also just diving in on a couple of questions that we skated over last time but want to explore in a bit more depth. So the first thing that we really want to focus on is this kind of difference in different industries and the use of furlough data to really give us a sense of how far the pandemic and the lockdown has really hit different industries, and also how the change in furlough uses change in different industries, and so what clues that gives us about their sort of recovery potential and speed, really. So as it says there, at the end of May, total furlough take-up peaked at 8.9 million employment, so just over 1 in 4 of the workforce. And then between then and the end of October, as we sort of had the end of the first lockdown and the opening up, and the potentially over hasty move to resuscitate the restaurant sector with Eat Out to Help Out, which may or may not have contributed to our further problems down the road, that took the furlough take up down by 73% from its peak to the end of October. So we saw a really big shift away from furlough, and that's a reduction of 6.5 million people that had been furloughed back in May, getting back to work for the most part, because we know the majority have. There's some exit from the workforce entirely, which is mainly EU migrants and a few other migrant groups that don't seem to have appeared in unemployment or economic inactivity, and they just seem to have left. Unemployment has increased, sadly, but only by about 350,000 over that same time scale. So, whereas furlough reduced by 6.5 million, it's only 350,000 that went to unemployment. So overall, that's quite a sort of a big shift back to work, which is quite reassuring for the future, actually. And since then, furlough has increased, but as we talked about quite a lot last time, in January, it's only got up to sort of the levels that we saw in the summer of last year. It hasn't returned to the levels that we saw in that sort of April-May period. So if you can go to the next slide, please, Andy. And so the data here by industry helps us to see a bit about why that is, really. And so on the left-hand side there, we've got the distribution of furloughed employments by individual industries. And so as you'd not be surprised to see, it's accommodation and food services that's the highest, and wholesale and retail there, and then at the lowest it's things like energy production and public administration and things like that, much more key worker based industries, really. And the black lines here are the share at that sort of cross labour market peak, which was at the end of May, and then the green bars are for the end of January data. And so what you can see there is that for a lot of industries, the end of January is kind of back to where it was at the peak, and indeed in accommodation and food services it's even higher. But there's two quite big ones there, construction and manufacturing, and both of these are quite big in sort of jobs terms, that are actually some way below where they were back then, and that actually, and we talked a bit about this last time, they found ways of working that weren't immediately obvious back then. So back in spring last year, the government guidance was very much workplaces, unless they were full of key workers, should be closed. The lockdowns that we've had since November, including the most recent one, they've been much more accepting that as long as you can find socially distanced ways of doing your work, then it is acceptable to be at work. And so you can see the sort of the reduction from the peak there on the right-hand side. And so you see the energy production and supply, even though it was only a very small share of the workforce that was ever furloughed, it's the second lowest in terms of overall level at the peak. Almost all of those workers are back to work now. Same with mining and quarrying, same with water supply and wastage. But then you see construction, which was quite a big share of the workforce that was furloughed, has actually mostly gone back to work now. And the same with manufacturing. And it's these ones at the sort of the far right there, accommodation and food services, information and communication, that have seen a relatively small change actually. So workers that were furloughed before are still, relatively speaking, quite likely to be furloughed now. So if you go on to the next one, one of the things that we've been looking at is using our job postings data, which has been sort of our most powerful source this past year, really, because of its real-time nature, is to just really understand what the sort of the recovery is coming at. And so last time we did that by looking at the sort of the last few months compared to those few months of the first lockdown. But now we're really just focusing on what's been going on in this sort of the 4 months of this kind of lockdown period starting in November. And so what we've done here is just mapped out that, in February, as it says there, we had nearly 700,000 newly advertised job postings. So 6% down on November, which is, disappointing in some ways, but, bearing in mind the lockdown was a lot stricter by February than it had been in November. But just beginning to see which are the occupations where demand is really beginning to pick up again. And it's quite an interesting mix, really, because at the top there, you've got media professionals, and then you've got agricultural and related trades, and so between them, Countryfile obviously has a bright future. But you've got quite an interesting mix of jobs. Some of them in those kind of more production industries like agriculture, some of them in professional services. The ones that we're not seeing, of course, and we'll see this a bit more in a moment, are those that are in those kind of consumer-facing services, the restaurants and so on, which are still effectively shuttered. So if you can go on to the next slide, please. Of course, what you find is that these have a sort of a geographic imprint, and so we're seeing quite a diverse range of outcomes in terms of job postings pick up over that February to November to February period, where the sort of the darker patches here, so we're seeing a lot of those in sort of northern Scotland and southern Scotland as well, but then also in certain parts of England, sort of Hertfordshire, Bedfordshire, Leicestershire, then around the Humber and East Anglia are relatively slow in picking up. And it's these brighter patches that are where we're seeing the bigger growth. So Mid Wales is doing quite well, but where you really see it a lot is in London. So you see areas like Wandsworth and the City of London, but then just outside there, Thurrock in Essex, which are really seeing sort of strong double-digit percentage growth comparing February to November. Now, this is quite interesting because what we actually saw is that it was London, especially central London, that really saw the biggest dip in job postings early on when we go back to the second quarter of last year. And that's because London is typically a very high churn, high turnover labour market with lots of recruitment activity going on. And really a lot of it just fell precipitously in those early months. And so the fact that it's kind of growing so quickly now is quite an interesting sign that actually this, when Andy Haldane at the Bank of England talks about the coiled spring of the economy, you do get a sense that there is a little bit of that going on there. And it's quite reassuring to see. So if we go on to the next slide, and we return to occupations here, we look at two-digit occupation groups, and we put this chart up last time, but I think it's worth revisiting to sort of just get a sense of how occupations is shaking out, comparing the most recent lockdown experience on the y-axis to the original lockdown experience on the x-axis. And so you've got these at the top right, the strongest throughout group, which were all hit hard in the first lockdown group. You're seeing 20-40% drops in job postings, but compared to the rest of the labour market, which is that vertical line, they were actually hit less hard. And then in the sort of the y-axis, what we're seeing is that they are recovering much better. Some of them are still down on where they were a year before, but only marginally so, whereas some of them, like health professionals and protective service occupations, are actually really growing quite strongly. And then you've got this group in the top left, the bouncing back group, which are jobs that were hit really hard, actually more than the wider labour market in that initial period, but have actually been growing really well. And of course, what stands out there is skilled constructions and building trades that actually saw a 50+% fall in that first lockdown period compared to a year before. But now, comparing the sort of the most recent few months with the year before, are actually up by a third. So there's a real catch-up growth going on there, where actually they're sort of, not only got the building sites open again and people back from furlough, but actually seeking to catch up on lost time in recruitment as well. So really reassuring. And then you've got these ones at the bottom left, and these are the ones that, as the economy opens up, hopefully on the roadmap, we'll hope to see them improve significantly, because what we've seen is that they've been bad in both periods. These are jobs like, some of them are quite predictable, things like leisure, travel and related service occupations, things like customer service roles, sales roles, where a lot of those restaurants and leisure businesses have really just been hit hard. But we're also seeing it around admin roles. If you think about sort of base level office admin, it's more difficult to recruit to if people aren't in those workplaces. But also some of those associate professional roles. Professional roles seem to have held up really well. They are typically in that strongest of that category, but some of those associate professional roles, the ones that are sort of helping in those sort of technical specialisms, and often part of the pathway up towards those professional roles as well, are really still struggling. And so it'll be interesting to see whether opening up helps to restore those, perhaps as people return to their normal workplaces as time goes on. And of course, the speed that takes place is still an interesting variable to consider. So if we go on to the next slide, really just to sum it up, what the data is telling us really is that, there's high-skilled roles still out there that need filling, and have pretty much held out throughout. I mean, most of those roles can be done from home. Most of the people on this webinar today are the kind of people who've got those jobs, and we've been able to do those jobs. It's taken some adjustment, and we've had to learn new skills, new ways of working, but we have made it. And because that core of the economy seems to have picked up somewhat since that first lockdown, demand has stayed there. And so there's sort of work to be done. But the greatest disruption is in those service-oriented roles, typically quite low skill. And as it says there, care is the exception here for obvious reasons, but also some of those middle skill roles around secretarial, around sort of associate professional and technical roles. And some occupational areas, especially those in the sort of the lower skill part of the production economy, so and the middle skill part, so skilled trades, building labourers, people like those, have really begun to bounce back, while others remain depressed. And so it's seeing how much of those other ones start to pick up that we really want to think about. And so the big question we want to sort of focus on for the rest of this is, what can we really do to help people quickly take advantage of the bounce back economy? If you've lost your job or if you've been on furlough, what can we really do? So it's on to the next slide and back to you, I think, Andy, at this point.
Thank you. Yes, an interesting walkthrough, and I think continues to be the theme that it's not a uniform picture across the economy. There's quite considerable variation across industries. The profound question of those industries that continue to be struggling is to what extent they return, the pace of return, but also have things changed in this time period that say they return in a different way. So that's certainly something to keep a close eye on over the coming months for sure. But interesting to see that plenty of back to normal and growth in the economy. It's happening in very specific and certain places. And as you say, that bounce back economy is one area where there is re-emerging demand. Those strong, that top right corner of the occupational chart that you showed have been strong throughout and tend to be at the higher skilled end of the labour market, perhaps a different end to the labour market that's been disrupted. So your more traditional, I suppose, workforce progression and graduate routes remain strong there. The big question is, for those that have been affected, are there routes back into taking advantage of what is bouncing back right now versus sitting on our hands and waiting for the rest of the economy to open up? And of course, one of the ways in which we might understand the potential is to really kind of dig beneath the headlines of that bounce back quadrant and start to think not just what roles are driving opportunity and employer demand, but what skills employers are actually seeking, so we can start to think about how skills might transfer from areas that are still struggling and suppressed, and perhaps that those on furlough still but worried about the future, or those are now sadly in the unemployment bracket. And so what we've done here is just pick out for the new job postings in January and February, around about 160,000 or so new postings in that bounce back quadrant that we looked at, to pick out just the headlines of the most commonly sought skills by employers as they go out to market. So we're tagging every job posting with the Emsi skills language, and here are the 50 most frequently mentioned skills on the screen there in the word cloud. So you can see there's quite a range in that top 50. Some are fairly generalist skills, customer service, management, maths, PPE, communications, computer literacy jump out there as a range of skills there. Plus there are then more specific technical skills, so the MIG welding, forklift operations, HVAC, and others. So there is a range there, and I think the interesting questions that we pose on the left-hand side here is ultimately for individuals that are facing labour market disruption, what can we learn from what's in demand to think about the skills they already have from their education and work life thus far. So if you think that retail and aspects of retail have been impacted greatly, well, actually potentially there are a number of skills here, particularly around warehousing and stock management, etc., that could translate across. But then the profound question is, if I'm here and I've got some aspects of those skill set, what skills might I be acquiring while I am where I am to give me the best chance of heading back in? So that might reflect more of those technical skills. How do I build on my transferable skills and experience, but perhaps then quickly build up other new skills to help me take advantage of what's clearly growing in demand right now? And so, of course, the only way we can truly answer that question is to know what skills are actually in demand. And so hopefully, you know, that word cloud on the screen is helpful to starting to think through that and how we might guide and support people and individuals, or you as your organizations lead people to opportunities there. So really interesting, hopefully interesting to kind of shine a light. And of course, that's just a headline summary. The real key is to dig down deeper and really start to understand that more specifically. And that's definitely the shout we've been putting out more recently, which is continuing to want to, you know, empower you to have that kind of information, but specific to your local area. We saw from Duncan's analysis that different localities across the UK are responding differently, and even within that, the sector and occupational mix will vary as well. So whilst we're trying to present kind of the big picture, our challenge to you is to really dig down and truly understand what's going on in your local area. And of course, we're here to help, as we've been talking throughout. So we had previously mentioned some of the reports that we put out. The local labour market reports are still available. We've had an incredible response and request for information there. That'll be available for just a little bit longer now. So if you haven't requested your local report, be sure to do so. Follow the URL on the screen. And of course, you know, we sit on this wealth of data at very local levels. And so, you know, if we're not already working with you, do give us a shout. There are different ways in which we can illuminate what's going on in your area, whether that's a provision of some quick focus data to give you the headlines, or whether it's a case of actually opening up the breadth of information so you can really dig deeply in and shape what the activities that you're doing. So please do reach out. But as I mentioned up front, there is more. So we're really excited actually to just thinking about that skills conversation to be launching today, fresh, shiny, and ready for you, a new service, a new solution that we'd love for you to get access to, which is really about trying to help individuals ultimately understand how they might take advantage of these bouncing back opportunities based on the skills that they have and the skills that are in demand. So really excited to launch here our prototype tool called UK SkillsMatch. So we actually have built this tool as part of our participation in the Nesta Career Tech Challenge, and that challenge is just coming to a conclusion now, where we have built this infrastructure. It's an infrastructure that we have been using in the United States for a good number of months as well, and that's fueling a lot of rework and back to work activities across a number of states in the United States, which is very exciting. And we've been grateful for the opportunity through the Nesta Career Tech Challenge to bring that here to the UK, to our labour market and our data, and we're making that tool available for people to utilise. The basic premise of SkillsMatch is quite simple. We want to help individuals understand the skills that they have through helping them navigate their work history and experience and start to build up a personal skills inventory, what we call their skill shape, through a very easy workflow. Then once we have their personal skill shape, we can then start to match them to common skills groupings, clusters, career areas that align very closely to the skills that they have. Some will be very much in their field of vision and study, but the goal is to really start to illuminate other parts of the labour market, proximate parts of the labour market that they may never have considered to explore, but actually require a good number of the skills that they already have through their own experience. So we're hoping it opens people's eyes to new opportunities, and thirdly, actually helps connect based on the skills profile that they have to live postings, job postings, and job opportunities in their area that match their profile. So it's a really exciting solution. It is a prototype, so it is far from a finished article, but we were keen, given the environment we're in right now, to make that available to you and your organizations to really help as we bounce back and respond to the re-emerging economy. A bit more detail here then. So in terms of building up a personal skills inventory, basically, as you have seen throughout this presentation, you know that we sit on data that helps us understand the relationship between jobs and the skills that employers are seeking. And so we're using that data that we hold to help an individual, based on plugging in their job titles from their work history, to start to recommend the sorts of skills that we are seeing associated with those roles in the labour market, so they can work through and select the skills that they have, identify skills maybe that they want to build up, but of course they're relevant to the work history that they've built. So plugging in various different jobs and work experiences and other elements can very quickly help to build up that personal skills inventory. And once we have that, as I say, we can match that into common areas of the labour market that show demand for those sorts of skills. Duncan has worked across our full data set of over 40 million job postings we have for the UK to build up what we call skills clusters as part of this project. Those skills clusters are basically looking at where we're seeing common groupings of skills in demand in the labour market and grouping them together. So instead of being limited by occupations or even job titles, actually thinking about where do we see skills convening closely together. And of course, then that helps us understand what other clusters are similar to those to other clusters out there, so we can start to see career transferability and opportunities there quickly and seamlessly in the labour market. So that provides a sense of direction. And then the third item is really about that kind of more operational and tactical matching of that skills profile to advertised jobs right now, right here in the local area that you're looking. And you can see on the screen there examples of different job roles that match, that are seeking the skills that we have listed within our skills inventory. So hopefully just breaking down some of the complexity of understanding actually what do I have, what attributes do I have that are in demand in the labour market, and making those quick matches back into opportunities. So the great news is we're making this solution in its prototype phase free to access, and we'd be delighted for you and your organizations to visit the website we've launched today, skills.emsidata.co.uk. You'll see there the opportunity to kind of learn a bit more about the Emsi skills language and ways in which you can interact with it. We have a number of different resources, SkillsMatch being one of those resources. You can simply click on the link. We'll request a little information from you, and you will start to get you'll get a link through to the SkillsMatch site and some resources over the coming weeks to help you utilize that. And we really want to put that into your hands as organizations that are on the front line of helping our economy recover and your local economies recover. I know a number of the organizations that you work for and with will have skilled advisors, careers advisors, employability advisors, and we think that this could be a useful tool in the toolbox to sit alongside all the other activities that these skilled advisors are doing to help them navigate this very complex, very fast-moving environment that we're in right now, and to bring the benefit of the power of the data that we sit on. So I'd actively encourage you to check that out. Feel free to pass on to colleagues so that we can so that they can get access to this and start using it. And we have a couple of requests around that. The first one is that you use it. We think is a very helpful resource. We want you to use it to really help the communities that you're serving, and we hope it really can be helpful. And secondly, we want to hear from you and learn from you. This, as I say, this is it's a new solution. It's part of a journey, an interesting journey that we're on, and we're keen to utilize this moment and your work to learn from what you like, what you don't like so much, and what you wish it could do more as we think about how we evolve this technology. But it's really a really exciting step for us, and I'm very honored to have the opportunity to get this out and get this into your hands so you can utilize it. So please check that out and let us know how you're getting on. But as we talked about right through the data section earlier, you know, this is where the challenge but the opportunity lies, is really about helping individuals truly understand their place in the labor market. I think it even pre-pandemic, and the Nesta Career Tech Challenge actually was kicked off before the pandemic started, and so hasn't been a response necessarily to the COVID pandemic, but was more actually aimed towards the disruption through automation within the labor market and helping people navigate their way through as the labor market changes. I think we've just seen that pace of change skyrocket in the last 12 months, and probably will do so for the 12 months to come. And so anything we can do, it's our belief that if we can illuminate and help people truly understand the skills that they have and find alternative places in the labor market, understand what their skills gaps are that they may wish to fill to take advantage of new career routes. We think that's a really critical part of the act now moment that we're in right now, but actually is important. An important philosophy, I think, that just needs to be brought to everyone's lives going forward, because the reality is the labor market is going to be shifting and changing in ways we can never predict, and clearly at a pace that is very difficult to keep track of without really getting into the weeds on this stuff. So we hope this is a great resource to help with that. So yeah, grateful to have you alongside us and to be using it in your communities. So hopefully that's been a helpful summary of what we're seeing, and I'm very excited that you can get your hands on a tool to help you navigate at the tactical end of these challenges and opportunities. We'll continue to explore, and next month, towards the end of April, Duncan and I will be digging into more detail around skills demand and really starting to focus a lot more. So I think that'll be helpful and useful, and should sit nicely alongside your use of SkillsMatch and other work that you're doing there. So be sure to keep an eye out for that one. Visit our webinars page to sign up to that webinar. We also have a couple of others in our sector-specific series, webinar series. So we have a webinar from our economic development team, so our team that primarily serves the worlds of local enterprise partnerships, local government, and employability services, regional employability services. So on this theme of really helping people navigate the labour market, our colleagues Will Cookson and Martin Gerard will be talking about how you as local areas can really help your communities navigate by sharing more of that information. I think that'll be a useful session. And then my colleague Richard, who leads our work in the university and higher education space, will be continuing the theme of helping universities and higher education institutions to continue to understand what's happening in the labour market to influence the skills planning, portfolio development, course planning activities that universities continue to press on to make sure that we are preparing graduates for great opportunities in the labour market. So hopefully some useful insights for those of you in those sectors. So Debbie, do we have any questions today?
Yeah, we do. We have a few questions. One of the delegates said, sounds like a really informative resource to use. Thank you. How frequently will the job postings be updated?
They are live, so they will be updated very frequently. So yes, no, that's the goal is to keep it very current and relevant to live opportunities.
Okay, and another question was, is SkillsMatch only free to subscribers or free to all?
It's free to everyone right now, for sure. We think we want to, there's a real challenge on right now, and if we can do our bit to help you do your bigger bit, then that's great. As we say, it's far from a complete, holistic, finished solution. So we may be looking to find subscription models or other ways of working down the line, but right here, and certainly we've committed to Nesta as part of our submission that we'll make SkillsMatch available as a thank you to their support till at least the middle of the year. It may well be even longer than that, so we'll keep you posted.
Cool. Is there a minimal age to the users for SkillsMatch tool? Only because one of the delegates suggested that in the future functionality, it could be useful for helping secondary school college students consider their future options.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, it is aimed very specifically, and this is the nature of the Nesta challenge, was aimed at people in work thinking about navigating through disruption. So it tends to have probably a bias towards adults, but there's a wealth of good information there that could be used in quite different ways. So even if just a case of understanding the relationship between jobs that people are maybe interested in or thinking about pursuing, and understanding the skills that sit within there. So I think it could have applications. I don't think it's the silver bullet for that community, but I think more and more so going forward, and you can see this actually in our career coach product, which is maybe the better fit. Trying to illuminate not just what jobs and occupations are in demand, but actually what employers are seeking in skill terms is really important. So hopefully it can be used in a whole range of areas, but it tends to, the workflow is somewhat biased towards people who have a work history. But yeah, it's
okay.
It should be useful.
Okay, great. The other last question. Will the SkillsMatch tool be available as an API to link to people's websites eventually? Is that
great question. Yeah, no, absolutely. So the SkillsMatch tool as a prototype is in effect a prototype. I'm trying not to get too technical here because I'll confuse myself. But the SkillsMatch product is a prototype front end to a number of APIs that we already have and we're using elsewhere that are already integrating. So actually there are ways in which the types of functionality could be recreated in people's websites or third-party solutions as well. That would probably head down our commercial route, to be brutally honest, because that will be utilizing in effect our commercial data APIs. But there's definitely a conversation to be had about trying to pipe some of these elements in, and for us, SkillsMatch was our way of playing with the data that we already have, that we know we have, and proving a bit of a concept that you can bring it into an environment and triangulate the data sets to kind of help individuals, as well as just simply share the information, but help guide individuals. So we think of it as a bit of a kind of a demonstrator. And as I say, the feedback from people using it will really help us understand whether we're on the right track, or if there are better ways to connect back together the data. So yeah, happy to talk some more about that one.
Okay, are the job postings quite local? I mean, I've got a question, how local are the job postings on the SkillsMatch tool?
Yeah, Duncan might be able to say a bit more about this, but basically they're town specific, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and what we do is, if I remember correctly, we set a location for the user, and then we identify all the towns that are within a radius of that, basically. So yes, they are localized.
Right.
So the example I showed was Basingstoke, so just type Basingstoke in there, it listed that, and then it will pull in postings for the town and surrounding areas.
Yeah, it doesn't sort of break it down by particular groups, because it's not an analyst type product. The idea is that it's more end user facing, and so therefore it's kind of bringing up jobs that are relevant to their local area.
That's really helpful. Thanks, guys. That's the end of our questions.
Great stuff. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for joining us. Hope that was useful and some useful insights there. I should say we'd love feedback on these webinars, in terms of what you like, what you want to see more of, that sort of stuff. So I'm sure we'll have a more formal way of capturing that down the line, but please don't hesitate to reach out and let us know, and would happily try and consider that as we try and illuminate different facets of what's happening in the labour market. As I say, next time we'll be really digging deeply into skills, and particularly what skills are emerging and have emerged through the pandemic, and what's in greatest demand, and build on that. But feel free to share your ideas and thoughts as to what would be helpful. But otherwise, I'll hand over to you, Debbie, to bring this to a close.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. That's very exciting. Looking forward to getting in the tool and having a play. Thank you ever so much for joining us, everybody, and we'll hopefully see you on our next webinar. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.